Okay, well, my name's Kelvin. I've run Raven Farm Sawmills for 25 years now, and I just wanted to make a little video as I've been seeing a lot of YouTube creators with their description of running a small sawmill, and kind of was depressing me in the beginning because I thought, man, these guys are like 25 years old and have been doing this for about 5 years, and they have millions and millions of dollars in equipment, things that really don't represent what you would expect out of operating your own small sawmill operation. So I wanted to make a quick little video in my rambling, bad sound kind of way about why you won't get rich in the small sawmill, portable sawmill industry, no matter what the publications advertising show about how you can buy this machine or that machine and it will pay itself off in months and you will have an easy time. But anyways, I built my own band sawmill 25 years ago, ran that for a few years, bought a new Wood-Mizer LT40 with money I borrowed from my dad because I was clearing a house site that was heavily wooded, and in my naive calculations I thought I could turn these trees into lumber and make a pretty hefty dent in my sawmill purchase. And I just wanted to talk about why that wasn't true and what I found out. For the vast majority of people, and I think this is referred to as the Pareto distribution, there's a few YouTube guys who happened into that industry accidentally, who have made enough money to make it look like there is money in this industry. And the truth of the matter is, you can do a simple breakdown on how industry values the different components of a small operation like mine, which I take sometimes trees from the woods that I cut down myself, saw them, dry them, machine them, and then take them to a fairly high-end retail store who sells them for me on consignment, period. Sorry, I'm used to voice to text saying period. But anyways, so after 25 years, I've done my best to squeeze all the available efficiencies out of my little operation. And 25 years later, I'd say, you know, I'm making $25 to $30 an hour, and I don't know of that how much I'm really keeping, because you have to factor in retirement and whether your machinery is really being upkept and you're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. So I just wanted to mention basically the value adding that you're doing, and why when you buy a portable sawmill and cut boards, those boards can easily have no value and they're very difficult to sell. And I found this out the hard way. It may look like lumber you could buy at a local hardwood center, but I'll tell you some reason why it's not. The vast majority of all these little guys I see on Facebook Marketplace trying to sell the logs they happened into are basically starting with firewood or pallet grade logs. Now, there has been a niche industry for this type of material, and we utilize it too. We call it craft wood, where you take this lower grade material and you can do some live edge and other odds and ends, and that has been a godsend to small mills because a number of reasons. The material is quite cheap. You're utilizing it much more efficiently, meaning you're not taking a round log and making it square. You're able to saw through the whole thing. But the true quality of that lumber is quite poor, and when this niche market peters out, which all things like that tend to do, you will see that it's quite hard to produce high quality lumber in a consistent form that true woodworkers in the industry would value. For instance, I get offered barns from old guys who've died and left lots of lumber behind, and often when you go look at that, it's you know, it's the whole tree, which means maybe if you're lucky 10 to 20% select grade lumber. That would have been what a small mill would have been focusing on, and then the vast majority of it is what would be pallet grade or damage due to powder post beetles or poor storage or any number of ways it can be ruined. But so the logger essentially gives the landowner an average price for the log on the stump. So the landowner may be getting 20 to 75 cents a board foot for an average hardwood standing tree here in the Midwest. The logger might be making 10 to 15 cents for cutting it and skidding it out. The truck driver might be making 10 to 15 cents for hauling it to a mill, wherever that might be. The mill could expect to be valued at sawing by the board foot, depending on the quality of the material. You can always find old circular sawmills that will quickly turn your nice logs into parallelograms and devalue what would have possibly been something of value. But assuming that we are turning out a quality product, say 15 to 25 cents board foot for the sawmill operator. The kiln operator, small batches, they may be 50 cents a board foot, but larger quantities, probably value added 30 or 40 cents, I would guess. There are exceptions with big slabs and thick material and hard to dry situations, but we're looking at this typical values that you will be adding to any given material. And then once it's kiln dried and we do our mill works, big production mill works should be 20 to 30 cents a board foot to surface 30 sides. And then you have your finished product, of which hopefully you have sorted out the garbage before it even went into the kiln, but of course a lot of people don't bother to do that. We're very lean, and for instance, we aren't a big enough operation to cut railroad ties, but essentially I'm throwing out the middle 4x4 or 6x6 of any given hardwood log, as the grade is not sufficient to make any money when you're running, in my instance, an LT70 wood miser sawmill and having two partners in this operation, and what I calculate to be, I might have $800,000 in equipment and materials, from wheel loaders to forklifts and support equipment. So given that infrastructure, you have your final product, which what percent of that log out of the woods now makes a grade that is worth a cabinet maker's interest. I've seen statistics on that. Obviously, depends on the grade of the logs that you're buying and starting with. So the more you pay for the log, the higher the percent of that log hopefully will be a high grade yield. And you will be more efficient by having maybe 50 to 60% of that board foot scale being something that would be finished planed product at the end of all these steps. So then in my business model, we pay stores to consign this material for us, as dealing with customers is just not economically feasible. They occupy too much time for small sales. And so we found that paying about 25 to 30% of our sale price to the store in consignment was reasonable for them to handle the sales tax and the credit cards. This arrangement is about as efficient as I can make it, given my limited budget and my desire to spend more than a full-time job working on this operation, which the vast majority of people who are trying to make a living with this type of operation, I would say your first 5 years you will be not making any money and negative, trying to make payments on support equipment, trailers, trucks, tractors, sawmill. And if you do try to get by with just a sawmill and a pickup truck, well, you can do that, but you will not be making the $80 an hour for custom sawing every day of the week, all week long, week in and week out. Typically, it will be a hit and miss kind of thing. And from my experience, you'll have a lot of time to fill in unless you're doing this as a part-time job, which we're not discussing. The most likely situation is that you will have a very large investment, which I have been able to reinvest in my company over these 25 years to get my company efficient enough to produce this $25 to $30 an hour for a number of people. So we have bought old broken equipment, fixed it up ourselves. We have not had any financial backers. No banks give loans to people who don't have a rock solid track record, especially in a field that's kind of unusual to them. So you may end up buying a bandsaw with a manufacturer's financing at 20% or so, thinking that in a few months you'll have paid off quite a bit of it. But in reality, it doesn't work that way for the vast majority of people. And so if you take all the value added steps that you could hire someone else to do for you, pretty much here in the Midwest, and add that to your raw material price, even if it's free, you have cost to go retrieve it. It's not an easy task. But assuming you're buying higher quality material, the best you can afford to be an input in your operation, you will have these fixed costs, and that is the value that the industry puts on each of these steps. So to think that you are going to go out, get free logs, cut them, and put them on Facebook, and you may sell a few slabs to people who don't know any better, or people who have time on their hands and who may not be very happy in the future when they discover how much work it is to make this product usable, from drying to flattening to sterilizing and all the things that go on behind the scenes. But I do see an awful lot of people jumping in on this operation with the hopes that it will look like it does on YouTube. And I just wanted to mention my experience, and that after the first 5 years of being in the hole, you're just working your equipment, the next 5 years you might be making minimum wage, full-time job, thinking to yourself, I'm lucky to be running my own business. But if you're smart and you're trying to do this without daddy's money or some big financial backer, this is probably the route that might happen for you. So minimum wage, next 5 years, 15 to $20 an hour, next 5 years, $20 to $30 an hour. This reminds me, I have talked to some successful sawmill operators around me and across the country, and what I typically see is, if you're going to support your family and run this business full-time with no crazy internet money, to have insurance and a retirement and a viable business that has insurance and coverage and not guerrilla style, so that your kids are not going to be in trouble if people get hurt. You're looking at a lifestyle that most of those guys I know live in their barn or a trailer home. It's tough. The other guys I know that have nicer houses and have made a better living at it, I ask them how much they're making per hour, and they say, gee, I haven't thought about it. And that's one thing. People don't want to know what they're making per hour because they like working for themselves, and there's reasons to do that, and being your own boss. And I said, well, how much money did you take out of your company for your personal use last year? And they said, 25,000. And I said, well, how many hours do you average a week? And they said, oh, 60 to 80. So I said, let's do the math. It's not very much. So you can put in a lot of time and make the numbers work. But if you're working the same amount of time as 2 full-time jobs to do that, there are much easier things to do, and things that don't take one accident or one fire to wipe out everything that you've worked for, and it happens. So therefore, you do need the insurance, you need to cover yourself, and you need to look at the real margins of running an operation like this. And my shoestring operation has gotten to a viable point, not that we're ever secure in the markets that we have or the national economy as a whole, as talk of recession is around, retail sales go down. When the economy is feeling better, sales go up. You can't live on a thin margin and go bankrupt when the market's down and buy jet skis when the market is up. So that brings me to the other beef I have with some companies online pushing their materials, their products. And you can kind of hear this noise behind me. This is a door into my homemade dry kiln, which, because I run a wood operation, I have wood waste. And we heat this shop, my house, and the kiln behind me, which is 40 feet long and about 8 feet something tall. So stuffed, it could do about 4,000 board feet. It's on tracks. All of it is made and monitored with simple tools. I saw the own material. I did pay $2,500 to have them come spray foam the inside of it to make it watertight, because having this attached to my shop building, it would rot this thing out if I had tried to seal it myself. It's impossible. So the spray foam does a good job of that. And so there are what seems to me to be gimmicks about these turnkey kiln situations. For only $50,000, $60,000, you can have instant dried perfect lumber with no thought process on your part. But when you get into the details of that operation as well, you start seeing how that product, though great for very specific applications, fitting the needs of your general small sawmill operation, which I would say is drying the most material in the most cost-effective manner for the quickest amount of time and yielding a quality product. So in my 25 years, I've always had my own homemade kilns, as we simply air dry the material at least a few months, if not longer, for thicker material. Put it in the kiln for a few weeks, and we have a finished product that is made in a kiln that maybe cost me $3,000-4,000 in material and my labor and making my own lumber for building the structure, compared to these operations that are selling these turnkey, easy, plug-and-play units that cost $50,000-60,000 on the small end, and typically have an unusually small kiln chamber size, which people will not be utilizing to the maximum potential due to how strange the layout is. But these things have been around for a long time. I think Wood-Mizer started the vacuum kilns in the mid-80s. There have been high-frequency kiln dryers and vacuum kilns and various sorts, and they do have their specific applications, but it is an example of a very high product cost, a fairly high energy input cost once you look at the way they are actually being used in real life, which means my kiln may sit in between charges for a number of weeks. Therefore, it does not matter if my 4,000 board foot kiln can dry a load in 1 or 2 weeks, unless it's running 24 hours a day nonstop. If you do your math calculations based on that concept, it does not work that way. You will always have weeks and weeks where you're busy doing other things, where the material that's supposed to go in it is not ready. Umpteen reasons why you will not see and amateurize your payments on such a machine and not wish that you immediately had that money for other pieces of machinery that could be more efficient in your small sawmill operation. So anyways, I have been watching these videos and seeing these promotional product videos, and the YouTube guys and commenting to friends and on the internet about how it's just TV, you know, this is not a real situation. These guys are not turning out product that is valuable enough and selling it fast enough to justify and explain the value of the equipment that they are showing. So for the small guys, just focus on your efficiency. Don't buy big crazy products that claim they will revolutionize your business, because they probably won't. And you need all your assets to be invest as wisely as you can to make it in this kind of business. So watch yourselves and make sure you spend the money on insurance for liability and property and health to back up what you're doing, so that you don't simply get injured or lose what you've built up by winging it and just hoping bad things won't happen. So take all your expenses into account: wear and tear on equipment, a retirement plan, you name it, and you will get a better idea of what to expect when contemplating trying to get a start in a small operation for sawmills. Anyways, I'm sure lots of people will be commenting that I missed certain elements, and I'm sure I have. I'm speaking about generalities and what you would expect from an average situation. The other interesting aspect that comes to my mind is that trees that are available to sawmills and the zoning that will allow you to operate a sawmill typically exist far away from the centers that would pay the premium on your material, big cities. So focusing on selling a product and having consistent sales, not a couple slabs every once in a while from a walnut tree that you found on Facebook that fell over and you were able to get with your log arch trailer, but day in and day out, how many thousands of board feet of a product that you can reliably have the basic resources to create the log supply and the demand for this material, and then reverse engineer what actual products you need and where your bottlenecks are. Anyhow, I just had to make something because I was sick of feeling bad that after 25 years, I'm not where these 25-year-old guys are on YouTube, but I think they're apples and oranges. One is make-believe and one is kind of my real life experience. So have a good one.